Hello, everybody, wherever you're watching this from. I'm amazed at how beautiful and uniquely diverse life is, how it can get, how it can become, and how much we need to expand our minds and our abilities to think so that we can have more adequate of life. Because with a limited mind, you get to savor little of life. But when you open up your mind to the diverse possibilities that life has to offer, we are guaranteed by nature itself that to be deposited in our minds is the riches and the greatness that life has to offer. And I'm in that point in time in life where I'm extremely optimistic that regardless of the state of life I currently am at, that there is a better tomorrow. That all I have to do is to keep on pushing, keep on pulling myself and dragging myself through the mud, through every difficulty, through every obstacle, at every juncture. And for a fact, life is not meant for the soft-hearted, but for those who are willing to go beyond the extremes of life. And that is the reward of the person that is willing to fight through the book of life would say that the kingdom of heaven has only been possessed by those who take it by violence. So I'm in that phase where I have learned that violence is a prerequisite to a great life. It's not only about the great thoughts, but the actions, the great actions we equally input to combat the uniquely unfairness of life. That aside, so a week ago, I had a great lunch meeting with a friend of mine, a gentleman that I highly salute. I have been friends with him for 10 years now and counting. He happens to be an advocate, and he'd called me up and was like, let's take a cup of tea. And I was like, let's do it. And so we proceeded. I met him at his workplace, and later on we go to this hotel to savour a cup of tea. And my good friend the advocate, he was sharing with me an incident that had happened within the month that had him all in thoughts. And I remember distinctively he was telling me that he's in a phase in life where he's realizing he knows a lot, he knows too much, pretty exposed to life, but he happens to be surrounded by people who seem not to come close to his point of knowledge base. And that reason, he's always at loggerheads with most of them. And so he's learned that the best way for him to coexist with these people around him is to be less disagreeable with people and more agreeable, to avoid reasoning with people. Because the moment you try to reason out with somebody who isn't willing to change their perspective, you end up in this level of debate, level of argument back and forth, and there is no productivity out of it. By the end of the day, they still go home with their shallow mind and go home frustrated that even after efforts of trying to change how a person thinks, you haven't achieved that target. And so for him to reduce the degree of disappointment, he's learned to be more agreeable with people. You see a cup of tea, and then this person says this is coffee. He don't argue with them. He's like, oh yeah, it's coffee, and he lets it slide. And he's like, that's where life has allowed him to reach. And then he proceeds to share with me, and actually that's a big level of exposure and maturity for you to realize that arguing with people don't give you no results, because nobody loves to be wrong. They want to pull you and drag you into their level of thinking for you to accept them and approve of their actions and their thoughts. The instant you appear to be on the opposite of their thinking, you arouse arguments, maybe resentment in them. And as a result, there is no level of productivity that can come out of it. That's a lesson I believe we should take home today. Now, the irony of the story is that this same advocate, he shares with me a story. The now had happened within the month still, and he happened to be in this meeting with his boss and a couple of colleagues, and they were having this conversation about how they can make the economy to be more productive by virtue of the businesses being done. Now, I have to credit my advocate friend. This gentleman, he is well exposed and versed in the area of business more than myself. Actually, at times I reach out to the gentleman to take up a few lessons, and I'm wowed by his level of knowledge in as far as business goes. And this guy, he's a lawyer. He's done too well business wise, and too exposed, man, too exposed. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing to master your craft, to be so good at what you cherish, because it tells us of exactly what you are, what your character is. And so this day, he, the advocate, his boss, and a couple of their colleagues, they are in their office, and they're having this conversation about how economical some of the businesses they are venturing into are. Now, my good friend, the advocate, he happens to be of a different breed, because his exposure, experience, and knowledge base in as far as the topic they were addressing is concerned was too vast as opposed to everybody on the table. And so somebody would raise a point and he will counter it with a better version of their statement. And it went on and on and on until even the boss would air their views. But their views were not as open-minded and as clocked in as expected, you know. And my good friend, the advocate, he will counter the boss's opinion in what seemed to be a good way, and correct the boss and share his insights, his levels of understanding. And as we are talking, my good friend the advocate, he would tell me that at some points he will tell the boss that no, you are wrong, it's supposed to be this way, not that way. And he kept on pushing and pushing, and not in a good way. Finally, they had to drop the whole topic and let it all slide to be revisited in another day. But unfortunately, what seemed like victory for my advocate friend resulted in other unexpected consequences. For instance, the boss refused to pay him. The boss felt belittled by someone who was junior to them. That there is no way somebody who is junior to me can disrespect me in as far as to question my opinion on this particular topic. And therefore, the boss, he refused to pay my advocate friend a second month, to an extent that my advocate friend would seek higher opinion, higher counsel for him to get his money released. And it went on like that. Resentment was built upon resentment, until finally he realized that his working spot had become a little bit toxic, and he had to quit the whole job. That was harsh. And now, when he was sharing the story with me, I was trying to, share some aspects of my little understanding of human understanding and psychology with him. And I thought maybe what I shared with him, I can just bring it out also in the open, because I know maybe most of us, we are struggling and going through the same things in life every day. Now, just take this wild imagination. You are a person, this is an imagination, you are a person given to love of honey. In our language, you call it asali, and in my absolute mother tongue, we call it what's this term? I'm forgetting. Okay. So, as a person given off to the love of honey, you venture out to trace where you can get some beehives and finally, scrap some honey for yourself, maybe to take home or savor in the moment. And you maybe go to a forest to find this beehive, and definitely by the scent coming from the beehives, there is definitely honey inside the beehive. But unfortunately, there is a lot of bee activity around the beehive, meaning that if you don't handle yourself carefully, you'll get stung by the bees. Now, what happens if in your excitement to tap and scrap the honey, you kick over the beehive? What happens to you? Of course, you'll arouse the wrath of the bees, and they will come at you full anger, and they will sting you. And it will be very hard for you to explain to anybody how you got yourself, your face all filled with these, all scarred, all right? So the better alternative is for you to find a way to disempower the bees. Maybe you can smoke them out, or you can find a way to get them to sleep. Then after that, you can scrap off the honey. Isn't that right? Exactly. And that same principle, it applies with dealing with people. By kicking the beehive, it stands for you complaining, condemning, and criticizing people. If you condemn people, if you criticize people, if you condemn, criticize, if you do any of this, you will not get the result you want from people. Because the instant you start to condemn, criticize people, you will arouse a need for them to justify themselves, and your point will not be caught by them. Now, let me share this story with you that I read in this book that I love. So, back in Chicago, there was, of course, the crime rates were a bit high, and there was this specific gang leader. He was called Tugan Crowley. He was being hunted by the police everywhere. A few minutes before they were hot on his heels, Tugan Crowley, he was with his girlfriend, and they were traveling somewhere, and they reached this spot, and the traffic police, they stopped him. Upon stopping him, the traffic police requested for Tugan Crowley's driving license. Angered by this traffic police request for him to give him his driving license, Crowley, he sprayed the traffic police with lead. He shot him point blank, just like that. And when the police got wind of what had happened to their colleague, they were angered, and they vowed, come rain, come shine, they would either carry him, that is Tugan Crowley, in a body bag, or he'll be rotting in jails. And so a pursuit for Tugan Crowley ensued, and he was sought for everywhere, until finally he found himself in a siege, surrounded by hundreds of police of Chicago by that time, and they were asking for him everywhere. They had him surrounded, and of course the air was rendered by gunshots everywhere, gunshots everywhere. And of course he took a bullet to the arm, which was not fatal, and it was at that point that he scribbled something on a piece of paper that he had. That piece of paper was found later on, and on the piece of paper, Tugan Crowley was saying that after his many efforts of being a public benefactor, what he got from his benefactor status was the reward of being hunted, a man running after his own life. What a reward! He did not condemn himself nor criticize himself for the crimes that he had done. However, he would see himself as a public benefactor. How twisted is that? How twisted? This man, he was from killing a police officer, but didn't find a place in himself to criticize himself. Now, the police commissioner running the arrest of Tugan Crowley, he had said that Tugan Crowley, he was quick with a gun, that he will drop someone at the flight of feather, too quick at it. But ask yourself, this same Tugan Crowley, who has hungered the whole police force, he don't blame himself for anything. He don't blame himself for anything at all. Now, what about the people that you and I, we meet and interact with every day? Do you think they take time to condemn or criticize for themselves for anything? Absolutely not. I agree with you. And if they don't condemn themselves for anything, what happens to you and your relationship and status with them when you go about condemning them or criticizing them? You arouse levels of hate, resentment from them, and in turn they will try and turn the tables and condemn you and criticize you in turn. That's how twisted life is. Criticizing and condemning will not get you no results whatsoever, because nobody loves to be on the wrong side. So maybe the best way for us to get a result we want from our interaction with people, maybe the first suggestion is, don't be quick to condemn people, to criticize people, because they will not take it lightly. They will quickly jump on the defensive side and try to justify themselves, and in their effort to justify themselves, you will be at loggerheads with them. You will not reach a point of understanding. So my suggestion to you today is that, number one, yes, if you will want to have your way, maybe the very first suggestion is, don't be quick to condemn nor criticize people. They will not take it lightly, because they will not want to be wrong. If people who have murdered, who have been quick on the trigger finger, who have been so quick and sharp in as far as cracking a safe R, if they do not condemn themselves, why will you go about condemning other sane people? Don't you think they will try and deny everything? Yeah, you're right, they will. So my very first suggestion is, let's not be quick to eat. If you're dealing with a man, a woman, a child, don't be quick to criticize them. Criticism will not give you the result you want. As much as we desire and love approval, we all dread condemnation. The next time you find a colleague, a friend, your child on the wrong, and you want to maybe correct them or air something out, may criticism not be the first step. There are other things for you to deliver what you want to deliver, but may criticism not be the first step. Even the good Lord would say that people will not be judged until the last day. So why will you be so quick to judge them so early? Why? Because the human psychology is against that. Alright? Take this other story. This gentleman, Lincoln, he'd been back in 1863 July, the Battle of it's called Gettysburg. Lincoln is leading an army after the battle, and after they'd won, they pursued a gentleman called Lee, and Lee, he and his remaining army were fleeing. And Lee fleeing, they reached this place where there was a river, but this river was pregnant. It was full, that they could not cross past the river and escape. And behind them was the army of Lincoln. But Lincoln, who was submissive to authority, he needed to get approval from his boss for him to either eliminate or capture Lee and his army. So what he proceeded to do, Lincoln, he telegraphed his boss The boss was called, is it Mead? Something, I'm wrong with the, not good the pronunciation. And so he telegraphs Mead and tells him that he need not organize a council of war so that they can discuss about what to do with the Lee situation. That Lee was in a place of being defeated, that he should give authority for him to pursue Lee and overthrow him instantly. That it was a matter of urgency. But do you know what Meade did? He did the exact opposite. He proceeds to organize a council and they discuss about what to do with Lee. But while they were doing the organization and everything, the riverbanks where Lee and his army were, it subsided and Lee found an opportunity to run away and escape. In anger, as much as anger as you and I would be in, Lincoln he writes a letter to Meade, and in the letter it began like this: do you know how misguided your indecision to approve the capture of Lee was? He was within our grasp. We could have quickly taken him down and ended this war, but because of your indecision, this war is indefinite, will continue indefinitely. But you know something? Meade never got to read that letter. Do you know why? Lincoln, he never posted that letter. That letter was found in his papers after his death. Maybe he came to himself and realized that even if he tried to condemn Meade for his indecision, Meade maybe had a reason for doing what he did. Maybe Meade, he'd seen too much bloodshed in his war times, that his ears were cracking with women crying, and he wasn't given quickly to bloodshed and war. Maybe that was the reason. But either way, we never got to know exactly what happened. Now, I'm suggesting, when dealing with people, don't be quick to judge them. Do not be quick to criticize them, because it will not give you the result you are looking for. This father, he had a child and he was always on the child's throat. You know, maybe the child had come from school, his trouser was torn, his uniform was dirty, and the father was always complaining, criticizing the child, why this, why that, every other time. And maybe he forgot to take his plate after a meal from the table to the kitchen, and the father was always criticizing this boy over and over and over. When the boy was going to school and he was on the school bus and he would wave at his papa, goodbye, excitedly, the father would just turn around and walk away. He was a bit strict, and this habit went over and over, on and on, until this particular day, after the father had sharply scolded the child. What had the child done? The father was in the study room, and the child quickly runs into the father's study room. And the father was angry, and in sharp anger, he tells the boy, get out! And the boy, with fear, he rushes out. Later in the night, the son was quick to tell the father, as though nothing had happened earlier on, good night, papi, see you tomorrow, good night, I love you. And after the child had gone to sleep, the father was taunted by the reaction he was getting from the child, as opposed to the from the actions he was giving over to his son. And hours after the son had slept, he tiptoed into the son's bedroom and he knelt on the son's bedroom on the bed, and he looked at his son. He was looking helpless. He was so innocent, so tiny, and the father, he began to shed tears, and he would say this, that, son, how is it that you're so good and I'm so bad? That regardless of how unjustly I treat you, you don't see the unjust treatments coming from me. You still love me. And how is it that it's too hard for me to see this? But now, looking at you lifeless here, I'm realizing that I've been trying to judge you from the lenses of an adult, and yet you're still a youth. And for that, I will do better. Right there. Let's not be quick to judge people if we are after getting a particular result. Don't do it. This author said, he was a poet, he said that the greatness of a man is measured by how he treats the little man. The greatness of a man is measured by how he treats the little man. So it's crucial how you treat the little man. Don't throw yourself over to see how wrong they are, how they should instantly change their way of doing things, because if you jump into criticizing, condemning them, you will not get it. And now I would like to maybe proceed to show you maybe an alternative on how you can get your way without bruising friendships and relationships by condemning and criticizing people. Thank you for listening for this part of this video. I will drop in the next one in a while. Otherwise, like this video, subscribe, give a comment. I salute you. I love you guys. I love you. Let's meet at the top, because the bottom is preserved for the least. Otherwise, let's drive our machines, build our mansions, travel the world, and enjoy the cuisines of the world, because success is a choice.